So what does it take to be a successful nationwide wholesaler? I've got 5 things that will help you understand the model and, most importantly, what you need in order to be effective with it. Now, number 1 is you need online lead generation. There's no way that you can do nationwide wholesaling and target multiple areas without using online lead generation. It's going to be way too expensive with other conventional methods and too cumbersome. And in fact, that's how the whole thing started, at least with me. Back when I was doing Facebook around 2016, you could target by zip code, but then Facebook took that away. And then what ended up happening is, just by luck, I had accidentally did not put in a geographic area inside of the platform for targeting. And so what ended up happening is that all of a sudden I started getting leads, cheap leads. And I was like, oh my God, I cracked the code. Oh my God, I'm a genius. And then I was looking at the leads and saying, wait a second, these leads are all over the place, but they're cheap, but they're everywhere. And then I realized, oh, wait a second, if the wider I go, the cheaper the leads. Now I got to figure out how to analyze these deals and how to sell them. But in essence, that's how it all started for me. And you need online lead generation for doing nationwide, because that's going to enable you to target a variety of different areas easily. But also, it'll tie in to the item number 2, which is the wider you go, the cheaper the leads have to be. And that's because not all the leads are going to be great. In fact, people always ask me, Chico, these social media leads, I just want to make sure that they're good leads. I mean, they're a seller that filled out a form. Sometimes they're idiots. Sometimes they're nincompoops. Sometimes they are just batshit crazy. And many times they want more than they, more for the property than it's even reasonable. And sometimes they're in the middle of nowhere. Like literally, I look at those and I say, oh my gosh, if I visited there, somebody could kill me and they would never find me, right? Because it's such a small town in the middle of nowhere. You're going to get those leads. It's unavoidable. Now, because of that, you have to pay the least you can for a quality lead. And there's when I say quality, meaning somebody with intention that filled out a form, gave us all the details, and that lead has to be cheap. I'm talking about if you do nationwide, $10, $15. If you're targeting 15 to 20 states, then the lead has to be, $30, $35. And that's because you're going to have breakage. You're going to have some of those leads that you're never even going to call, never even going to bother with, and you're just going to throw it away. And it's okay. You can't do that if you're paying $150, $200 per lead. Now you're taking every lead that comes in. If you're paying that much and you're carrying it on a little white pillow and gingerly walking it across your desk because, oh my gosh, I gotta make something happen with this crappy lead that I paid $150 for. Your leads have to be inexpensive in order for you to make this model work. Now, the third item is that when it comes to lead generation, you have to be as close to the source as possible. And by that I mean that either A, you're running your ads yourself, 2, you have an agency running ads for you, or whatever the case is, you got to try to avoid buying leads from someone else or getting, somebody else's leads. And again, there's a lot of people out there that sell leads. So I'm going to make a blanket statement that may not apply to some of the platforms, but it does apply to others. And so you have to be mindful of this. If you're buying nationwide leads with some of the platforms, they sell the primo leads individually to the highest bidder. That means that if you want Florida leads and you're willing to pay $200 for a Florida lead, that platform is going to sell you that. And it's going to do that with everybody. And then they're going to have a bunch of leads that they have generated, and now they're going to go ahead and sell them at a discount from the normal leads, but still pretty expensive, generally about $75 or $80. Now those leads now are going to be what everybody else didn't want. The crappy trailer in the middle of nowhere, the seller who's completely out of their mind bonkers, right? And so then you might complain and say, oh my God, these leads are horrible. It just happened to be the issue with those leads that they're giving you the table scraps that nobody else wants. Ideally, you want to have your own source of leads. You want to be as close to the source as possible. That means either A, you're running your own campaigns or somebody else is running them for you, and you have and they're coming directly to you, and nobody else is touching them but you. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have competition. It doesn't mean that these people are not talking to other people. That's where your sales ability comes in terms of, and that's the case with any model that you're operating in, whether it be nationwide wholesaling or local wholesaling. Whatever it is, you got to have your game on. Otherwise, somebody's going to eat your lunch. So you got to eat their lunch. All right. It's a game of who's going to eat whose lunch. So you want to be on the side of being being full and happy, and not being hungry. All right. Number 4 is you have to be able to get good at the virtual model, obviously. But in order to do this type of model, everything is done virtually. That means that you got to be able to analyze a deal without knowing what the repairs are, by guesstimating what the repairs are. You got to be able to go, and our primary tool for using this is Zillow. You got to be able to go into Zillow without knowing anything about the market, and within about 5, maybe no more than 10 minutes, you have a pretty good understanding of the dynamics of that market. You understand how the market is moving. Are there a lot of actives or pending properties? Are there, how quickly are the properties moving? Are they just sitting on the market? What are the different neighborhoods in that market? Is this property located in a nice area or in a crap area? And all those things you could determine just by really looking at Zillow. So let me know if you want me to do a video on my strategy for using Zillow. Make a comment and put in Zillow. And then if I get enough, then I will make a video on that, because I think that's one of the really core things that people get hung up on. The next thing is, in terms of the virtual model, the implementation of that model is number one. The next thing is being able to communicate with sellers effectively in terms of the dialogue that you have with them, so they feel comfortable that you're not going to be going over to the house and physically inspecting the property. Now, the script that we use for this is Mr. Seller. Say the seller says, "Hey, how can you buy this property without ever looking at it?" Well, Mr. Seller, we buy properties throughout the country. And the reason and how we're able to do that is because in all these small markets, just as the market that your property is located, we have investor partners. We have people that we partner up with these properties, and they're going to be our eyes and ears. They're going to be our boots on the ground in coordination with the contractors and everything else. And so what will happen is that once you and I agree on the price and terms, and we're going to go ahead and set up an inspection with one of our partners in that particular market. They're going to review the property, and they just want to make sure that the property is exactly as you said. I mean, if there's a hole in the roof and you didn't tell me about it, that's going to be a problem. I'm going to come back to you. But as long as it's in general condition of what you said, and then they'll give me the thumbs up and say, yeah, we could definitely coordinate this. It's not that based on the work required, etc. And they give me the thumbs up, and now we will then take that property and send it to the closing table. I just gave you a very abbreviated version, but you can get the gist of that. And that's the thing that you need to do. You need to be able to clearly articulate to the sellers how you're able to do this model virtually. The next thing is photos. People get hung up on photos. How am I going to get photos of the property? Well, there's really 2 ways. You either can get them free or you pay for them. The way to get them free is you get the property owner to take the photos, especially if they're living in the house. They can easily take the photos. Most of them have a cell phone, just like you and I have a cell phone. And they're able to snap photos. If they're going to do that, have them send them to you by email, because their pictures are going to come out a lot better if they're sent to you by email. Now, if you are not able to get the seller to take photos, maybe they just don't have the capacity to do it. Maybe they're living in the dark ages, in the Flintstone ages, and they don't have a phone. It's probably a good deal if they don't. Just kidding. Maybe. I don't know. All right. So what you can do is you can use a service like HomeJab. We use HomeJab. There's other services like that available, but it's HomeJab is the one that we predominantly use. Sometimes if they don't have coverage, they might charge you an extra fee for somebody going to the property, but generally that's what we're doing, and you're going to pay about $100 to do that. And obviously if you know that the deal is a great deal, then you're going to do it. If it's iffy, then you can always skimp out, because there's different packages. You can get the package that has less photos or more photos. You can do a package with a video. So it just depends on how good of a deal it is. And the photos help, because then when you're having the property be seen by the buyers and you're connecting with buyers, generally they do want to see photos of the property before they go and take a look at it. So it just makes the process a lot easier, and then it's less people that have to go through the particular property when it comes to showing it. And then you don't want to piss off the sellers or the tenants, because there's just so many people coming through the door. The last but not least is you need buyers. And here's the thing. you could do everything right. And at the end, if you can't find a buyer, you're not going to make any money. I'll give you an example. We recently closed a deal last week in North Carolina with one of our student partners. This is where we set up the ads for our clients. If you're interested, there's a link in the description. You can reach out, just fill in your information. I'll reach out. And so we set up the ads, and then they run them, and then now they have the option of giving us a deal. They're not obligated, but we want some deals. So we had one of our clients try to sell a property in North Carolina, and they just weren't able to find a buyer. They were trying for the first 2 or 3 days, and then they got us involved. And they said, hey, can you find a buyer? So we went out into our buyer databases, and we were able to find a buyer. But not only were we able to find a buyer, but this buyer ended up being ended up paying us a $21,000 assignment fee. So think of this, that if that particular student could have completely walked away from the deal, canceled the contract, and said, oh, that wasn't a deal, it doesn't work, it's hard, etc. But yet we were able to find a buyer for $21,000. I mean, that's a big difference. 0 to 21,000. So having the right buyer database is critical. I'm gonna tell you what we use. I'm gonna put a link in the description for the different databases that we use. The number one database that we use pretty much 99% of the time is Investor Lift. In that property that I just mentioned, the buyer came through an agent. There was an agent on Investor Lift, and they went ahead and reached out to us. This particular property was a tear down, meaning that the buyer is going to tear down the property and rebuild a completely brand new house. This agent works with that buyer in sourcing properties for them, and then now they go on ahead and connected us. We paid them a small commission, $2,000, and so our net was 21 after paying them the $2,000. And then now they're going to go ahead and sell the property eventually when that buyer builds it, right? But that buyer, the source came from Investor Lift. Now, there's other tools available out there in the marketplace. It depends on your budget. There's another one called Investor Base, which is it's more affordable than Investor Lift. It certainly doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but you got to look at your budget, and because what you want to make sure you put as much of your budget into marketing. So if it's not in your budget, then you work within the tools that you have necessary. Maybe you can come on board as one of our partners, and then we can help you sell the deals. And eventually, you get to the point where now we helped you sell enough deals that you got enough money that you can buy any and all tools, and you don't need us anymore. But you need that. There's another tool from a company called iSpeed to Lead called Deal Speed that's out there. I'm in the process of testing it as well. I don't know anything about it other than the fact that, hey, the owner reached out and said, hey, try this tool. We actually paid for a subscription to try it out. And then, of course, I'll let you know. But my primary, numero uno, is Investor Lift. And you can check out a link in my description. There's a discount code that I have available if you wanted to consider that. But there you have it. Those are the critical elements for nationwide wholesaling. Obviously, I can't go into nitty-gritty detail about every single thing required, but I'm giving you the basic components that you need in order to be able to make this model work. So what I want you to do right now is 2 things. Number 1, make a comment. Let me know what else you want me to cover. But number 2, most importantly, check out this video here. Because without the right mindset, you ain't going to make any money, even if you had all this down pat. So I want you to look at that video, because that's going to give you an exercise that you can do in order to make sure you get your mindset right and you make some money.